everyone. My name is Bill Allen. In the early 1880s, as the Rio Grande pushed deeper and deeper into the southern San Juan Mountains of Colorado, they found that the terrain wasn't the only challenge. The weather conditions would swing radically in just a few minutes, and certainly the conditions in Antonito or Chama rarely matched those at the summit of Cumbres Pass. The challenge of Cumbres is the story of the ongoing struggle between railroad men and their beloved steam-powered contraptions, teamed against the most powerful and unpredictable force on Earth, Mother Nature. In October of 1870, William Jackson Palmer and a group of friends and associates formed the Denver and Rio Grande Railway Company. This little railroad would be the first of its kind in the United States and its territories. The original charter called for the narrow gauge rails to go south out of Denver to Pueblo, and then follow the Arkansas River west about 60 miles, turning south at what is now Poncha Springs, then over Poncha Pass into the San Luis Valley. From there, follow the Rio Grande River south to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and eventually on to Mexico City. This would make the Rio Grande the first north-south route and the first international railroad, as well as the first narrow-gauge common carrier in the country. So, on July 29, 1871, the first spike was driven in front of the Denver Depot, and optimistic track crews started laying the rails south along the front range of the Rockies. Of course, nothing goes like it's supposed to. The big money crunch of 1873 stopped the Rio Grande in Pueblo. The Santa Fe Railroad, after arriving in Pueblo, claimed the Royal Gorge route west, which the Rio Grande was entitled to according to their original charter. A real war and legal battle broke out between the two railroads. The Rio Grande had a commitment to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or lose all the land that was granted to it along the right-of-way. Even though money was still tight and legal battles with the Santa Fe Railroad raged on, the Rio Grande started laying rails south from Pueblo to Cachara, then west over Levita Pass in 1876. In 1877, Palmer managed to get a 5-year extension of time from the government to reach Santa Fe. Still struggling financially, the Denver and Rio Grande entered the east side of the San Luis Valley in 1877. Then on to Alamosa in 1878. Even though valuable time and resources were lost, the Rio Grande finally won the battle with the Santa Fe over the Royal Gorge route with the help of Jay Gould, a very powerful and influential financial tycoon of the time. It's now the early 1880s, and with the financial help of Jay Gould, the Rio Grande is laying track into many mining communities and coal reserves. Up to this point in time, the Rio Grande had only experienced the harshness of Colorado winters along the front range of the Rockies and over Levita Pass. A few snowdrifts and frozen water tanks was about all there was to report. A story of a one-car passenger train coming out of Colorado Springs, bound for Denver, is an example of how winter can cause trouble with steam-powered equipment. The 7:15 p.m. schedule left Colorado Springs on time, bound for Denver January 10, 1873. The locomotive was the Montezuma, a 240 class, weighing only about 26,000 pounds, and one passenger car with 20 paying plus 4 crewmen. It was a very cold night, 20 degrees below zero. The train pulled up to the water tank at Monument to take on water and wood. While half the crew loaded wood, the other half tried to get water out of the tank, which had a frozen water valve. No water was the verdict. The engineer thought that they could make it to Palmer Lake on what water that they had. Going easy on the throttle, he nursed the little train up the 2% grade toward Palmer Lake. Well, they ran out of steam 100 yards short of the water tank. Not to be thwarted this close, the conductor summoned all the passengers and crew to push the tiny train to the water tank, only to find it was frozen too. The engineer said, "Well, let's push it on over the hump, and we can coast almost all the way to Denver if we have to." so that's what they did. And finally, after coasting for 35 miles, they found the Sedalia water tank willing to give a drink to the thirsty little Montezuma. This kind of story was fairly common back then, or maybe the crew had to shovel through a snowdrift or two in order to keep the schedule. When the Rio Grande headed for the gold and silver camps in the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado, is when they realized the full power of Mother Nature and the Colorado winters. The path we will follow is south from Antonito, Colorado. The first 64.5 miles is a twisting and winding route through boulder-strewn lava fields, pine forests, tunnels, and over the 10,020-foot Cumbres Pass to Chama, New Mexico. Then west 108 miles through the rough country of northern New Mexico to Durango. Then north 45 miles up the Animas River Canyon to Silverton. This is the San Juan extension. The locomotives of the day were still small, 2 6.0s and 2 8.0s, weighing between 60 and 80,000 pounds. These locomotives were much larger than what the Denver and Rio Grande started with, but certainly no match for what lie ahead. In the summer and other fair weather months, falling boulders, floods, and mudslides were the major threat to the railroad. But in the winter months, the snow could come down at the rate of 2 to 6 inches per hour, then add high winds and drifting to the recipe, making for a disastrous mix which shut the railroad down for weeks at a time. Snow sheds were built in drifting locations, but still the elements often prevailed, burying the small train in mountainous drifts of snow for days on end. By mid-July of 1882, the Denver and Rio Grande rails had reached Silverton. The steep mountainsides along the upper Animas River Canyon had several treacherous snowslide chutes. Without warning, thousands of tons of snow, laced with boulders and trees, would come rushing down the mountainside, burying the train or sweeping it off the track. Snowslide sheds were built, and sometimes just tunneling through the snowslide seemed to be the answer to the problem of keeping the railroad up and running. Even with all that effort, Silverton found itself isolated for weeks at a time during harsh winters. Mechanical engineers working for the Rio Grande designed many different snowplows to be attached to the front of a locomotive. Then they would couple 2 or 3 locomotives together to push, and if for some reason that didn't work, men with shovels hand-dug through the slides. Steam-powered rotary snowplows were designed and built to keep the road open, but they couldn't be used on the Silverton branch because of the rocks and other debris which came down on the snowslides. So the rotaries were used on Cumbres Pass and other places where the risk of rocks and debris on the track was low. In early May of 1997, the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad fired up the old rotary snowplow OY for a snow removal demonstration. A triple header was put together to push the OY up the 4% grade between Chama, New Mexico and the summit of Cumbres Pass. In the world of yesteryear, as well as today, communication was and is a very important part of your job and your personal life. Steam-powered railroads were around long before any kind of electronic means of communication. Locomotive whistle signals were, and still are, the means by which trainmen communicate with each other. Each locomotive, even though it might be the same class and size, has a different sounding whistle. The rotary OY has a very distinctive sounding whistle. So each element of the snowplow consist is easily identified by the sound of its whistle. The OY engineer is in control of the various actions. The 3 pushers respond and verify the order given by the OY. 1 short whistle blast means stop. 2 long whistle blasts, proceed ahead. 3 short whistle blasts, back up when stopped. 2 short whistle blasts are sent to acknowledge the previous signal. It's a very fast and accurate way to communicate. There are 9 more whistle signals, but the 4 that I just mentioned will be heard the most. Pushing through deep frozen snow drifts is time-consuming and very hard work for the trainmen, as well as the OY, so a break every now and then is a welcome relief. The OY is one of two rotary snowplows owned by the Cumbres and Toltec. The OM is much older. It was built in 1889 by the Cook Locomotive Works and is on display in the Chama train yard. The OY was built in 1923 by Cook Locomotive and was patterned after the OM. Both are your basic locomotive boiler and engine systems, with the exception that the power is transferred through a gearbox to the rotary cutting blades of the snowplow. Snow can be discharged to the right or the left by simply changing the engine rotation from forward to reverse. It takes a lot of water to operate the snowplow train the 13 miles from Chama to the summit of Cumbres Pass, roughly 10,000 gallons for the OY itself. Then add around 2,000 gallons for each pusher locomotive. So the total water consumption is a little over 1,000 gallons per mile. The OY used about 9 tons of coal between Chama and Cumbres Pass, and each of the pushers used close to 3 tons each. It took close to 8 hours to reach the summit of Cumbres Pass, but the snow plowing was only for the last 6 miles of the journey. It is a slow and costly, but effective way to open the railroad, and was a necessary tool when the railroads were the only link between the mining town and the outside world. In late April of 1999, the Cumbres and Toltec put on another snowplowing demonstration, using the wedge plow and flanger. The lead locomotive is 484. Locomotive 497 was used as a passenger support and pusher. Our trip begins in Antonito, Colorado. Our destination is Chama, New Mexico. The planned trip is a 3-day journey. The first day reaching Osier, Colorado. The second day from Osier to the summit of the 10,020-foot Cumbres Pass. And on the third day, down Cumbres Pass to Chama, New Mexico. Here in Antonito, at an elevation of 7,888 feet, the weather is good and rather mild in the southern end of the San Luis Valley. We will climb 1,750 feet in elevation and travel 37 miles along a twisting and winding route through sagebrush hills, lava fields, pine forests, and 2 tunnels before reaching Osier, which is situated in the Rio de los Pinos Valley at an elevation of 9,637 feet. As we pass the lava water tank, we can see snow clouds to the west of us hanging over Osier and Cumbres Pass. Traveling west, our elevation increases with every milepost. The weather can change radically from sunshine to heavy snowfall and then back again. change in the weather has brought high winds and sometimes heavy snow flurries, which cause near whiteout conditions as we approach Sublette, New Mexico. Here at Sublette, the elevation is 9,276 feet. We've traveled 25 miles so far and climbed 1,388 feet in elevation. We'll take on water and then continue on to Osier. After passing through the Toltec Tunnel, in a shaded area near mile marker 316, 484 found a small snowdrift across the track. Before the end of our first day, there's one more small snowplowing job for 484. Gentle is the byword when plowing near the leaking Osier water tank. Our second day is much more difficult as we depart Osier and enter the upper Rio de los Pinos Valley. To further complicate matters, the weather has taken a turn for the worse. High winds and heavy snow squalls create low visibility and whiteout conditions. We will climb an elevation 383 feet between Osier and the summit of Cumbres Pass and travel a distance of 13 miles. As we enter the upper Rio de los Pinos Valley, the weather conditions constantly change, from bright sunshine to heavy snow squalls and high winds. As we round the corner at about mile marker 324, we encounter our first large snowdrift. flanger and several cars derail in deep, heavy snow. .497 is called in to help get the train back on track. After working hard digging out and using the frog, the cars and flanger are once again back on the track. .497 remains as pusher and helps .484 through the heavy crusted drifts. At Los Pinos siding and water tank, the locomotives take on water and rearrange the consist with .497 as pusher directly behind .484. The weather changes in surges of almost clear conditions to very heavy snow squalls. As the snowplow train leaves Los Pinos water tank and rounds the curve at about milepost 326, tragedy strikes. I can still hear in my mind the ear-piercing panic stop whistle from .484. When the heavy snow squall cleared, I could see .484 off the track on her side in snow and mud. The steering trucks of .484 had hit an area of track on the curve which was buried in solid ice and snow. It was very fortunate that no one was seriously hurt. It took almost a month to free .484 and get her back up on the track and towed to Chama. What we have just seen happened almost on a regular basis when the Rio Grande was operational. Many times the outcome was not so fortunate. Lives were lost and equipment was destroyed.